I'm Chris, a Boulder-based strength coach and founder of Kinesis. In each episode of The Roadmap, I sit down with elite athletes and break down the training behind their elite performance. Just like you, each athlete has unique needs that require different strategies to address them. Join me as we show you the roadmap behind how these performances are manufactured. All right, welcome to the episode, Eli. This is Eli Hemming. For those of you who don't know Eli is a very accomplished trail runner, former triathlete, and I've been Eli's strength coach for quite some time now. And I was curious, Eli, when you won OCC and you crossed that finish line, what were some of the emotions and feelings that were running through your brain as you realized you won?
Pure joy was a thing, but there was also a sense of relief. Like I had done some things wrong leading into that race that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about. But I almost lost the race, and I kind of blew a 10-minute gap into a 3-minute gap. So I thought people were coming up on me real hot. So there was a sense of relief, a sense of joy. When you actually put together a really good training block, just a wonderful sense of satisfaction.
Yeah. And then with any race and training for any athlete, we all have doubts and insecurities sometimes. And I'm curious, what do you draw confidence from in those moments of being like, no, okay, I got this?
Yeah, something that Tabor and I do a lot is we look just back on the training, and one of the things that kind of we're famous for is doing quite a bit of training, and I think that's something that always gives me a lot of confidence, and it's something that I did in my triathlon days of big volume, and then you can look back and you're like, well, not many people here have worked harder than I have, and it's something easy to tell yourself, and you can always just say, well, I worked harder than this person leading up to here, so I think I can outrun them when the going gets tough.
Yeah. So the product was a result of the process?
Absolutely.
Not just drinking espresso?
That does help.
More espresso equals winning OCC.
Yeah, just caffeine in general. Yeah. 1,000 milligrams.
Yeah, totally. But so training and that entire buildup, we've heard a lot about your triathlon journey, how you have this huge aerobic base and you've done 30, 35 hours a week of training, and that lended to you being aerobically prepared. Now, trail running is a little bit different from triathlon, where the impact on the body is much different, right? So can you talk to me a little bit about how you felt prepared for your bones, your tendons, and your muscles to handle the demands of trail running?
Yeah, I would say it definitely took quite a bit of time for all of that to get actually ready. I was going from training 30 hours a week of swimming and biking and some running to I was trying to do a lot of just running, and that is extremely hard on the joints. I tried going in a little bit too quickly, and everything just kind of hurt. The joints hurt. You wake up, you'd feel like a 90-year-old man. You're like, that's not good. So it's kind of something we backed up on and okay, well, we need to keep in some other form of training. You can't run like you can do all those other sports, like those non-impact sports. And so that's one of the reasons that we talked to you, trying to get those tendons nice and strong, make sure that we're durable, so that we can build upon weeks and weeks, and then eventually that volume gets bigger.
Yeah. And so let's backtrack all the way, rewind the tape to 2018 when we met, closer into 2019, and talk to me a little bit about why we ended up even having the conversation of working together, and in that time, what your perception and expectation of strength training was leading into that.
Yeah, so I think it was probably about a year or two earlier that I'd kind of come to the realization of okay, I can't just do aerobic exercise the rest of my life. There is a little bit more that needs to go into it, hormonal health, other things that come along with strength training. Those were super important things that were like, okay, just doing aerobic exercise for 30 to 35 hours a week doesn't get you exactly where you need to be. And I started working with another strength coach, but it kind of was just the same thing for a bunch of different people. Like we were working in groups. And so that's actually when we came to you, is when we were looking for something a little bit more individualized, something that would work for me personally, with my demands, my everything. And so, yeah, I would say how I was looking at strength training before was, the classic Arnold Schwarzenegger in the gym, throwing around huge weights. And it's something that kept me away from it before I learned actually like what it is that you do, what it is that we can do to make me more robust without tearing me down. No more bench press for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point where endocrine response is a huge factor in strength training. And I think in the industry right now, a lot of people think of it as load, right? How much tension can you put into muscle, right? Even loading tendons, blah, blah, blah. It's all super important. But if you really boil strength training down to one thing, it's actually endocrine response. And if all training is training, right, isn't endocrine response one of the main factors we have to be evaluating? And there's a huge impact in your actual training, right? So, for example, today was a great example. We did a session today in the gym earlier where it was strength training, but we moved through ranges of motion, right? Our goal was to bring a balance to your endocrine system and to produce some good hormones and take away some stress hormones, right? And in that bodybuilding mindset, sometimes there isn't space made for mobility work, quote unquote. We'd like to put things into these buckets, right? Oh, we're doing mobility today. Oh, we're doing this today. And it's about the big picture, right? So speaking of the big picture, can you kind of talk to me about what the big picture means for you when it comes to training? Obviously, you have your run training, but like what else are you thinking about, and what else are things that you're looking at from a data perspective?
I think that's kind of the number one question, right? Like we're always playing with it. We're always trying to figure out what that balance is. As a greedy athlete, I always want to run more, train more aerobically, and that's fun, but probably not the best for the outcome when it comes to the big results. It can get you 80% of the way there without having to account for anything. You can just go run in the mountains and be a pretty decent trail runner, especially with the aerobic backing that I have. But I think we've had to kind of step back and say, okay, so one of the big things last year is I didn't account for heat training leading into OCC, and I almost lost the biggest race of my life for it. So it's kind of looking at all these little important things that we need to check every single box, and that is making sure that the body's feeling super healthy, and that's kind of where we come to you of we want the body feeling good with training big loads. Yeah, I guess I don't know if I have a perfect answer besides we do have big life stress outside of just training. With Tabor and I working on the cattle ranch, there are other things that go into it, and making sure that we are recovering well enough. But it's just finding the balance. Hopefully we found it this year.
Yeah, an ever lifelong equation that you're trying to balance.
Yeah, there is no perfect answer for everyone because everyone's different. But I guess we'll see if we hit it on the head this year.
Totally. And with your point earlier about individualizing your strength training, not being in just a group fashion or just a template-based, environment, that goes for everything physiology, right? We're looking at training, we're looking at life. Everyone's life is different. The one thing we know about the human body that's the same is that nobody is the same, right? So nothing can ever be the same, and it's a constant balance of that equation. So we were at OCC, and you realize the mistakes you've made, and you won. And that seemed to ignite something in you of, I got to start doing things a little bit more dialed, a little bit more professionally.
Yeah, so I am, I would say I am lucky enough that I can get away with a lot in a 50K distance. I think there's a lot that goes into those races, but you can get away with just being obnoxiously fit for a 3 to 4.5 hour race. Obviously, we saw after that 4.5 hour mark, I was faltering. So I think after that 4.5 hour mark, you really have to start doing everything perfectly if you want to perform with the best people in the world, because there are people doing everything correctly. So this year I've decided to do a longer race, with that being CCC, which is a 10-hour long race. So there is a need to do everything, to check every box this year, not most of the boxes.
Totally. And with that, we just had you working with a good friend of mine, Jared Berg, on some metabolic and physiological testing. That being one of the boxes, how do you feel like that gives you more insight into how your body works? And what I mean by that, and with context for those listening and tuning in, when it comes to training the human body, you can't remove one piece from the equation. Right? I'll use a terrible analogy, Mr. Potato Head. For those of you who know, you can pull off an arm, a nose, and whatever, right? With human physiology, you can't just say strength training. It doesn't matter related to metabolic response. It doesn't matter related to your cardiovascular response, right? It's all one thing. So what kind of insight do you think that gave you into your own body?
Yeah, and we saw some slight relative inefficiencies in those tests, and it's something that we can train towards. Like, we know that I can definitely push up my LT1. Obviously, it's on a continuum, so it's kind of a murky thing, but it is something that we know kind of even just the demands of how hard, if I'm trying to run at a certain heart rate, we know, oh yeah, I'm burning a lot of carbs. And so it's even just knowing, say in that 10-hour race, I might not be sitting at my LT1 the entire time, but I will spend time there. And when I am there, I am burning almost 200 grams of carb an hour, which is humongous and not something that you can actually ingest, but it's something that you have to take into account when you're going into the full race.
Yeah, which is a huge piece, right? Having that data point, which we just talked about, right, in your training. And another data point comes from your overall training volume, what intensity you're training at, right? And then, again, layering in that strength element. This is where sometimes I feel like there's a disconnect between the running world, the quote-unquote strength world, the quote-unquote dietetics or metabolic world, where, again, if you piece all of these together, right, okay, what do we know can also decrease that carbohydrate demand? And that is running economy, right? Which you happen to have great running economy, right? But for example, we did some hip mobility exercises today. And what did we kind of find out while doing those?
I have zero hip mobility. I can move in a forward and backward motion. Anything side to side does not work for me.
Yeah, hips don't want to go side to side.
Yeah.
They don't want to go too high.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe a result of cycling for many, many years.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on a bike.
Yeah, something I see really often in cyclists is that exact pattern. But that's where I think there's so much beauty in pulling the data together and really understanding how it affects the human body, and then where you can draw some wisdom from how to choose the right thing in training. For example, you just talked about your LT1, right? Now, running economy-wise, if you had a little bit more freedom in your hips, do you feel like it would be possible that you could maybe have some energy savings there?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's something that, I mean, anyone who's seen me run knows I have this tiny little short stride, and I take about It's efficient, but I do take like about 200 steps a minute when I'm going hard. So it's one of those things that even if it's just opening up and there's a little less tension in that extension, maybe that's a easy free speed.
Yeah, yeah. So like we're talking now about where your body is. Back when we first started working together, for example, back to the hips, one of the things we saw was I'll call it a movement capacity deficit for you was probably glute activation, right? So when we first did glute bridges, we found that
got no booty. Baby got no back.
and we did some exercises, and over time, you now feel like you have a pretty good access to your glutes for that capacity, right?
Yeah, I think I'm actually able to engage them, which is something that I never had. I think spending all that time on a bike, I just purely relied and kind of got away with just quads. But I think instead of getting away with, I should be aiming for using the right muscles and the strong ones at that.
Yeah. And during that time, it wasn't like we were just doing mobility and whatnot. We were building up to first using your glutes. I want you to talk to me a little bit about the first time you ever used the K-Box. And for context, the K-Box is an eccentric overload device. And this is the only device that bridges the gap between eccentric loading in your tissue and plyometrics, right? It's the only way to overload the eccentric phase. So after the first time you used it, how did your glutes feel?
Oh, I was sore for days. Actually, like, it was forcing me to use that, and it was something that I hadn't done probably ever. So it was a shock to the system, to say the least. Yeah.
But afterwards, you got pretty used to it, and it wouldn't have the same soreness.
It didn't take long, yeah. But that first time, it was definitely a shock. But after even just a few times, I think that's telling that it was a little bit more neuromuscular than muscular. Like there were muscle fibers back there, so they just don't work.
Yeah, they're there. They're a little woken up now, and then now you're able to like maintain that. So, again, I love zooming back, I call it, where like you zoom in to the past, and just to see where you started. And in my opinion, I'm curious what your thoughts are. I don't think we were ever so aggressive with the strength training that it actually interrupted your training.
No, definitely not. That was something that I was pretty worried about, and something that I always caution people with is strength training should be an additive, not something to subtract.
Yeah.
It should be making you better, not taking away from your workouts.
Yeah.
Because the workouts are the most necessary, right? Like you need to do those. Those are what you're training for.
Yeah. And how often do you hear athletes say, oh, I lifted and I can't walk for a week or whatever, or maybe they're looking for that. They expect to feel sore from strength training.
Right. Whereas like even just today, like I feel better now that we did that kind of mobility type session than when I walked in the gym today.
Yeah. My one takeaway for people in strength would be pretty simple, where we have a rule that you should leave feeling better than when you came in. Now, there are people that might think, okay, like, well, are you getting anything out of that session? Over time, you did get stronger, right? Your glutes were more active. Your quads are already pretty strong, but everything did improve, right? Your spring stiffness, we were tracking some of these things, right, with that K-Box. You were able to decelerate in a shorter amount of time, right? Therefore, less ground contact time. So where do some of these things fit in for you now? Where's your body now? And with this 10-hour race, right? Like, what are some things that you're thinking about where, from a body perspective, that you can continue improving 1 or 2%, right? Your engine's already there, right? Like, what else are some things that you're thinking, wow, this could be a really great way to get another couple percentage points?
Right. I think just really that overall like durability style thing where 8 hours into a race, your muscles are going to be pretty tired. Like you have to be able to engage 8 hours into a race, engage those muscles. That's something that I don't know how to do yet. And so I'm hoping it is just something that with a little bit of more time spent strength training, doing those little things that my legs won't give out on me after 5 hours.
Yeah, yeah, which is also part of back to that metabolic testing. If we give you 1 to 2 degrees more range of motion or freedom of motion in certain joint ranges, it could mean less energy expended. Over a 10-hour race, if you can decrease a couple of percentages here and there in every step you take, huge.
Absolutely. No, that would be that'd be game changing.
Game changing, exactly. And these are little things that are such low hanging fruits, right? It's not actually a high energy expenditure in the gym if you do it right. So that kind of segues into this next portion where in a lot of these episodes and this type of format, you get grilled with a lot of questions. And so we're going to flip the script and let you pick my brain and just have an open conversation, kind of a Q&A between us of things that you think would be interesting to talk about and things you think would be interesting for most people who probably didn't have access to the Olympic Training Center, all these resources, and maybe are only tuning into social media for education, which, as we know, sometimes can be misleading. Not saying that I know everything either, but there are some sources out there that might need to be double checked.
Absolutely. No, I think watching Instagram reels are kind of the worst thing for people. You need to do this super intense workout, then like people just end up injured. I think that's kind of one of the hardest things is knowing how to do exercises that can be scaled, like starting very low and working up to it, because if you jump straight into the heavy exercise, you're in for a bad time. I guess one of my first questions is kind of just around periodization. Like, is it just periodization of the year? Obviously, volume goes up throughout the year. I'm not training super specifically in the off season. How do you recommend training year-round strength? Whereas, say, my biggest race is August like 30th or something, 29th. And so the question is just kind of how do you kind of work the year round, gaining strength, but not taking away from the running when it gets super specific?
Yeah, that is a great question. And back to your point of individualization, this is where there are a lot of great philosophies, a lot of great periodization schemes that you can subscribe to, and they're all great. But what we need to look at is, where is the athlete? Where are you? Where is your body? And where do we want it to be? So that's where I refer to, I call it initial movement quality and initial load tolerance. How well do you move? How much capacity does your tissue and your bones have to absorb load? And then what is the desired movement quality and desired load tolerance? That is the first 2 data points that I like to look at when I am considering how to periodize. And then we kind of work backwards. Okay, we know where you are, we know where you want to be. So you have CCC, right? And we know that buildup going into CCC is going to be quite intense, right? So during that time, what I would like to see is that we're in a place, strength-wise, where we've gotten you to a good place, load and movement-wise, and we're maintaining, right? Because we know that if we raise the ceiling on 2 parts of training at the same time, usually the result's not so great. Double espressos ain't going to help you there, right?
I think you're poking fun at me.
A little bit. But yeah, so we want to be in a maintenance phase. So during that phase, I use 3 M's. There's maintain, modify, and mitigate. You're maintaining what you did, right? We're not trying to build anymore. We're then trying to modify as needed, week to week. And we're mitigating injury, right? Injury is the number one thing that's going to take you out. So let's not do that. And then from there, we know that before that, we need you to have a great strength tolerance, durability, capacity, tendons are strong, muscular endurance is good, top end strength is good as well. We're not talking about maxing out, we're just talking about activating motor units. And then backing off more from there, that second part there is more figuring out what your major deficits are and making sure we're cleaning them up. If you have major imbalances, right? If you need more hip mobility, more access, right? So we're looking at the movement quality there. That's phase 1, I would say. Now we've worked backwards, right? We're here, phase 1. Then we load the system to make sure through those movement patterns, you can load them effectively to a place where we can maintain so that you can peak for your A race. So periodizing should be done around the scope of the season and the individual athlete. A normal strength periodization, those concepts can be applied, but endurance sports are a little bit different, right? So that is how I like to look at things. Again, there's a million ways to cut this cake, but that is, I think, one of the most effective ways we can look at it for, a 10-hour race or the endurance sport in general.
Okay, and so I caught you saying something earlier that really piqued my interest on kind of that note of in the recovery phase after a big long event. You said doing explosive things, kind of fun training. Is there anything specific that you think is super cool with the recovery of big, long, stupid events?
Big, long, stupid events. We should just reframe ultra to big, long, stupid events.
That's what they are. I'm a professional big, long, stupid eventer.
Yeah, I love it. I think one is the neuromuscular system and your nervous system. Just doing something big, explosive, fun, where you're not actually like thinking so much, right? For example, today we did some big overhead medicine ball throws, trying to hit this super tall ceiling we have in the gym. One, it's fun. There's something to be said about the psychological side of things, breaking the cycle of this repetitive motion. And neuromuscularly, most of these events are very, very demanding in a very repetitive way. So these larger movements, high velocity movements with very light weight, it's a great way to stimulate some testosterone production, to just allow your nervous system to do something super different. I would encourage people to do lateral movements, maybe hopping side to side, rotational movements, large, big overhead movements, anything to go fast, explosively in a way that's safe and doesn't put you at risk is a great way to reset your nervous system and your endocrine system as well. And you do recruit motor units when you're doing something full effort, full velocity. So it's a great way to just kickstart the system again. So if you think about, running an engine really long, right, for a long time, you got to let it cool down a little bit, right? If you think about this, it's almost like you have a second engine that you're not using so much, so you're kind of jump-starting that to jump-start the whole system again, right? So it's a great way to just kickstart things again, so you're feeling a lot better.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I had a great time today, so that's why it was interesting.
Yeah.
It was kind of fun, like even just being able to throw the ball so much higher after just a few glute bridges.
Yeah.
Which was kind of hilarious.
Versus walking in kind of like a zombie.
Exactly, yeah. Kind of jumping across to a different topic, but so in trail running specifically, I know road running is like 90% running economy. It's running economy is king when it comes to marathon. Like if you don't have good running economy, you will not be a good road marathoner. Whereas in ultra racing, there are people coming out with these studies are basically saying that running economy doesn't matter. Where do you think that strength training can still help trail running, even if running economy is, I don't believe that it doesn't matter, but it's less of a factor than it is with road running?
That's a great question. I actually would say, being a pseudo trail runner myself, that strength training is more important on the trails. And if we think about human movement as a whole, running is a skill, right? Much like throwing a baseball is a skill. The more you practice it, the better you get at it, right? And obviously strength training can help some of that force production, making it more efficient. But with that being said, strength training is loading base human movement patterns, right? Making those patterns really efficient, which hypothetically sets you up for success for any skill, right? There's a concept called PAPE, post-activation performance enhancement. There's PAP, which is like you can jump higher after you lift. PAPE is a concept used in track cycling sometimes where, say you do a 30-minute session in the gym, not only are you more neuromuscularly primed, you are actually connecting, new neurons, forming new synapses, motor learning a little bit, and allowing yourself to learn how to move more efficiently and fire from the right muscles. Now you can apply that to any skill and hone that skill afterwards, right? Now you will be more efficient in whatever you're doing afterwards. Hypothetically, this is a theory, well applied. But running economy is not the end-all be-all. It's the expression of that skill. I would call strength training, my definition of it is the expression of human movement, right? And it's the lab where you can control that environment, right? It's really easy. I can be like, oh, Eli, you're tired. We're done. That you expressed enough human movement today, right? Go run, right? Go practice your skill now and hone your engine. Right, so I think of running as skill and engine, and I think of strength as the lab where you can hone your base human movement to allow you to do that really well and not get injured, because then you're screwed. Yeah, so different concept of what strength is and running economy and how they interplay, but I do believe that the base of human movement, that's strength training, and it doesn't have to be load, right? It's just human movement.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think, how about just a low ball? What's because we coach quite a few athletes, and it's always a question. Fueling with strength training.
Great question. I will say I'm not a dietitian. There are many, many people I think are really smart, and I will always defer to them. But some main things to consider: one, you should probably increase your protein intake. Creatine can be a useful tool beforehand. If you're strength training beforehand and you have tendon issues, it's really well researched if you take vitamin C and collagen beforehand. Not coffee beforehand, because coffee is an inhibitor of absorption for vitamin C and collagen, so it actually doesn't work that way, from my understanding. But also caloric intake. It is still training. You're burning calories. You need to adjust to increase that demand. So super simple. I think fueling, carbs are important for strength training. Creatine can be really helpful as well. If you are planning on doing plyometrics or you are loading your tendons, which technically anytime you load up, put weight on a bar, you're loading your tendons. Vitamin C and collagen 1 hour before has been shown to be really effective. And then supplementing with carbs and protein after, right? So the same concepts apply to running, fueling.
Just extra load on the body, extra load on the system.
Yeah.
You need to feel for it.
Yeah, exactly. It's still more training. Yeah.
Thanks for being my smart person.
You say you talk to smart people for that. I talk to you for that.
And then I call smart people like, what do you know about this?
Yeah.
Let me get back to Eli.
We have a chain.
Yeah, chain of command. It's great.
Yep.
So to close out, I want to bring it back to the big picture. And we talked a lot about the past, the present, and the future. And even from a psychology of coaching perspective, do you have any advice to athletes on, how to really think about that long-term vision, that roadmap of their season or their journey in sport?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is, there's always more races. It's something that you can progress throughout your life. You don't have to progress this year. Obviously you want to progress throughout the year, but it is looking at it as a lifelong thing, especially with trail running. It is a sport that you can do throughout your entire life. There's people in their 80s doing big long trail races, and it's really awesome. So I think it's something that you can do forever. I would just say it's something that is really hard to do, but patience is the biggest virtue you can have with training.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think too, that starting point for a lot of people. Don't rush it. Understand your body really well. And, step one, where is your physical body, your chassis? Because if that is injured, it doesn't matter what volume you're running, you're injured, right? So if you can take care of that step one, that's maybe the lowest hanging fruit outside of sleep, nutrition, and consistency, right? But you can't have consistency if you're injured. And best way to prevent that, one of the best ways, is to have a strong foundation of human movement capacity.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Sweet. Fully agree.
Thanks, Eli.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to The Roadmap. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss the next deep dive into the strength behind endurance performance. Stay strong, stay focused, and keep pushing your limits, and I'll see you next month.